We're back again, brother. How you doing today?
Not too bad. How are you?
Look what I'm wearing.
I know. I see it.
Weeks of pestering, and I finally got myself a hat.
Right on.
Today, I wish it's blistering hot over here. We're in the Toronto area. It's what, 40
I
something
know.
degrees
It's
right now.
disgusting out. Us Canadians are melting.
I know, and we're not used to it too. We're used to
No.
freezing. And I had the AC running behind me, but then I don't know, like it picks up on the audio. So
Yeah.
I can't run it. So if I run a bead of sweat, it's not because I'm under pressure, guys. It's because it's hot in here. Right?
Right on.
There's something that's kind of interesting to talk about over here because I suffer from this all the time, perfectionism. And right? Like
Yeah.
for some reason, I'm always trying to make things perfect. I can't get it out the door. And actually you were the one guy that kind of held my feet to the fire on this one. Out the door is better than what?
Yeah. Yeah. It's better than perfect.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, I mean, when we're talking about perfectionism, there is an important point to make here. I think when you're brought up in the trades, especially a highly skilled trade, not to take away anything from the lower skilled trades,
Like a tile installer?
right?
Yeah.
There, it serves you. Okay. So a lot of guys, their perfectionism has served them. It's got them to a certain point with their business, their career, and their life. All right. But there's a point of diminishing returns. Okay.
Right.
There's a point that it reaches, if unchecked, that the value of perfectionism starts to decrease. The value of your business, the value of your life. Well, not the value of your life, but the value of, or the quality of your life. And what I mean by this is, and I see this all the time, all right, especially with tile guys. I don't know what it is. But the skills don't transfer. Okay. So when you're running a business, the worst thing that can happen is that we're afraid to take action. Okay. Action is what creates opportunity, and opportunity it only comes at certain times, right? So when we're over perfectionists, what I find that's really beneath that is a lot of procrastination, a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of thinking and planning and never doing.
And research.
Yeah.
Lots
That's
of
it.
research.
I can't tell you how many guys that I've spoken to, even in the last month, it's been really interesting to me that, we jump on a call and, they know everything about our program. They know, like they've done their homework. They've done their research. And, I asked this one question and I know where it leads. But like, hey man, like, it sounds like you've got all the information that you need. What stopped you from taking action before? And it's like a wall comes up. And I know what it is because we have to talk about it. And it's, well, and they go on about, how good they are at their trade or how good they are at certain areas. And like, I'm like, okay, well, but that's not really what we're talking about here. What's preventing you from getting from the point you're at to the point you want to be? And it almost always results in something along the lines of, well, I can't trust anybody to do what I'm doing. There's no way that I could pass on this job. There's no way I could do this. And then just all of it starts to come out, and I sit back and I let it pour out. And at the end of it, I go, and let's just take this as a scenario. Let's just say it didn't work out. What's the consequences of that? So let's say you did, hire someone to take 80% of the project management work off your plate and it didn't work out. Oh, well, I would just go back to doing what I'm doing. Okay, great. And tell me, what's the reward if you actually get it right? Oh, well, and then I would have all this time. And it's like, you just answered your own question, and again, it comes back down to the same thing. And it's something that, it could be formed in childhood. It can come from all different places. Mostly it does stem from childhood though. Like somebody was really hard on them. They had a parent that was, overbearing and just really, it got them to the point where they were afraid to make mistakes. They're afraid of failure. And that in business does not serve you. In construction and when tile, like, if you're not a perfectionist, you're going to have some problems, right? Like it's not something you could just slap together, like maybe framing, you know what I mean? Where you can get away with a little bit more. But where does that stand up in business? Where does that apply anymore at certain points in business, especially as you're trying to grow a business? So I have a saying that I really like, and then I'm gonna get your insight on this.
Yeah,
But
let's hear it.
I much rather take imperfect action every single day than one perfect step, right?
Yeah, I can
So
appreciate that.
again, what leads to results? Well, first of all, clarity and certainty. All right, that's what we get from research and all the things that we do. I get that part. We got to be clear. We got to be certain. But clarity and certainty should lead to confidence, and confidence should lead to action, and action should lead to results. Where the breakdown is between certainty and clarity is the cutoff in confidence, because
Right.
they're afraid of the failure of this not working out. When we have to reverse that negative belief, we have to reverse that thought process, and we really have to say, what do I have to lose? Right? What's the worst case scenario in the situation? And most of the time, almost all the time, if we just reverse that belief and we took imperfect action and we measured what the results are, we're going to find that it almost always works out, right? Especially for someone that's been a perfectionist for a very long time, you underestimate a lot of the intelligence you've acquired, the research you've done. Like, it's got to pay off at a certain point, and your instincts may be sharp enough to make these calls as you go, but we have to first get over that anxiety or that threat that you feel with failing.
Yeah, there's also a thing called the fear of success, and I know it sounds
Yep.
counterintuitive, but the fear of being successful and
Hmm.
leaving something that you're so good at
Hmm.
to run towards
Totally.
something that that you
Totally.
need to acquire skill. It's
There's and what comes there? Fear of being judged, criticism,
absolutely
right? Going from somewhere where you are absolutely the biggest fish to something where you're not going to be. Like, listen,
that's
we
right.
we know it's all about change, right? Fear of not being good enough. High personal standards, like, they get in the way. Belief in perfectionism as a path to success. If I just make everything I do perfect, I'm going to be successful in that. And my friends, there is many, many amazing tradesmen that I've met and ran into that are incredible at what they do, suck at business, and they're never going to get beyond that. And again, what would you rather have?
So, do you feel like maybe we're using perfection as an excuse not to move
Yeah,
forward?
because it's tied
Is
to our
that
self worth, right? So, very dangerously, again, a lot of guys tie perfectionism into their self worth, right? And then they concrete themselves in that position, and tell themselves the same story over and over again. And what they do is create a trap, right? So, again, it's the common conversation I have where it's so obvious, it's so, like, especially as we pull it out. But the reality of changing that, because your whole identity is tied around it, right? Like,
right?
how many
Yeah,
guys do you know are just the proudest trades guy? I mean, I meet it in cabinet makers. I meet it, like, they can tell me they're off by a thousandth of a square inch, and, like, I mean, they do beautiful work. Don't get me wrong; they do
right.
beautiful, projects that would challenge, just about anybody out there, and that's awesome. But there's a diminishing return. It also means that you are stuck in an hourly job, whether you want it, no matter which way you want to slice it. Okay. At the end of the day, you're selling your time for money, right?
Yeah.
Defense mechanism, right? It was, again, around project management, stuff like that. And I suffered with it. And it took somebody, like, kind of calling me out and pulling my card, for me to realize it. And I had to do an exercise, which I'll share with you. But the first way, all right, the very first thing we want to do is we want to kind of reframe. Okay. So pros and cons works very, very well. Right. So let's talk about the pros and cons. So this is a process that you would go through with yourself. All right. Where when you're making a big decision, all right, and perfectionists love to research, love to kind of stay in that safe zone. Okay. They know everything about a topic, but have never done it. Right.
Right.
So we have to think about the pros and cons, but let's think of the pros and cons of, what's the benefit of making the decision, taking the action, winning the game, right? And what's the con, right? What if I don't get there? And again, a lot of times I do this with clients, and I talk them right into doing the action. They just need that little bit of a nudge.
I like that.
Um, and again, it's a logical based way to disengage your brain from, removing yourself from the consequences that you perceive, right?
Yep. The
So,
fear.
and here's the thing: it's impossible to be perfect in business, no matter what, right? You can't be, because it's reliant on other people. There's so many moving parts and variables, and sometimes we just have to go with the right direction, the compass, right? Don't worry about the direct roadmap. Don't worry about that, because that creates this huge amount of inaction. And the
Yeah.
worst thing you can do, and how guys get snapped back and kind of stay in that safe zone, is they maybe ventured out before. They tried
You
something
got
new,
burned. Yep.
marketing, something like that, and all of a sudden they get burned and they shut right
Yep.
down. Like,
Yep.
so then I get to I get to have these conversations with them, and I was like, hey, man, one that just recently popped into my mind was a gentleman I was talking to about marketing. If he's listening, you'll know what we're talking about. But he had tried one agency and he spent $6,000. I was like, dude, I'm like, the first agency I had, I mean, I was spending like, well, not the very first one, like probably the third one. I was spending like that a month and was getting no
Yeah.
results, right? Like, don't take the financial thing as being the loss. Like, take the fact that you haven't tried it again for the last 6-7 years as being the loss. Because yeah, you know what, if something doesn't work, it's not the end of your business. But you know what could be the end of your business is not getting it right at some point, right? I always
Yeah.
have this good saying that I use with a lot of people is, it's not your job to be right all the time. It's your job to get it right. So don't get over it, right? Like, you're not always going to be right. Nobody in this world has a, a magic ball, right? What do they call those things? The crystal ball,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
None of us do. And if we did, we'd be billionaires, right? Marketers included. So like, no one, when you really get down to it, no one has the exact specific answer to solving those problems. You have to take a risk. You have to take a chance. You have to have a measurement of where you're going to stop with that risk and be comfortable with, but you have to measure it, right? It's the only way that will allow you to continue to proceed forward. And yeah, things aren't going to work out. It's just like hiring somebody, right? We all hire with great intent, but when it doesn't
Yeah.
work out, what's it do? Sets us back. Oh, I'll just do all the work myself. You tried one time. Like, what are
You're
you
right.
talking
And
about?
we say, like, if you're gonna fail, just do it quickly.
Right. That's right.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Get on to
So,
the next failure quickly.
so let me share something with you. It was an exercise that I did, and I'm glad I did it. It really brought things to light. But you got to remember, the perfectionist is an internal thought. Okay, and we are not our thoughts. Okay, so what I was instructed to do, and I did, and I recommend to anybody that's really truly struggling with this, is write a letter to your perfectionist. Write a letter to your perfectionist. In this letter, all right, we want to address the perfectionism. All right, start by saying thank you. Be grateful for the things that it had given you. All right, being grateful in acknowledgement of what your perfectionist has allowed you to, the position you've got to, maybe it's a skill trade, whatever. Right, recognize the wins that you've gotten from it. All right, but at the same time, you need to recognize the cost of continuing to be the perfectionist. What's it going to cost your future self for your present actions? Okay. And then write down the desired change. What do you want to change? All right. Set some boundaries. All right. So again, give yourself permission to make mistakes. Give yourself time and distance to try something new, to step beyond where you're comfortable. All right. And then put that letter away, and in 3 months, come back and look at it and answer the question: did you win or lose? Right? I had to do this, and I'll tell you, it's kind of what I do with customers now and with clients. What you're going to find is, because you acknowledged it, all right, you left, you were grateful for it, you acknowledge where it is, but you also realize how much it's holding you back.
Mhm.
Right? When we can do that, and then we set a boundary, all right, that again is going to give us that peace of mind in taking the action. Um, and then we add one last thing is reflect, right? So if you can do that a couple of times, your inner perfectionism will dissipate. It'll start to, because it's challenged, right? And it's proving to yourself that it's not serving you anymore. It's got no return. And again, for guys that are trying to move from the tools, let's say you're a finished carpenter with high standards, right? I get that shit. I understand. That is like, that's hard, but that's not going to transfer over into business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just not.
It's
You
an
can't
anchor.
be in control of it, right? And the other thing that's going to really affect you is if you do grow, all right, is that perfectionists tend to be highly micromanage their business,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And the micromanagement is what keeps you trapped in your business. You now have moved from being a skilled tradesperson, which you love, to being a manager of people, which you hate. All right. So you have to learn to let go, right? The only way you're going to let go is getting out of your own way. And the only way you're going to get out of your own way is, again, coming to grips with those thoughts, having a way to process through it, understanding the impact of it, um, and letting go. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to let go, right?
That's important. Just the way you said that, getting in your own way or getting out of your own way, because
That's
that's
right.
a lot of that's why we hold back. I love that writing a letter to yourself.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of like things in personal growth where it starts from acceptance,
Hmm.
acknowledgement, permission, action, reflection, and then
Right.
growth. And you covered all of it,
Right. Well,
right?
that's again, I didn't come up with the process. I wish I did, but it helped a lot. And again, for anyone else that's listening, it is all about personal growth, right? Like it's not just business because it's holding you back in other areas of your life as well, right? And what we find is that these people tend to be the most stressed out and have the highest anxiety, and again, have the how do I say it? They're the ones that I worry about the most, right? Especially in our programs because they put everything they got into everything, right? And not everything requires that much of them. And in fact, the more you get into business, you realize that hey, again, your job is to get it right. You have to hold other people accountable. You can't be all on you, right? It just can't be.
So to a perfectionist,
Hmm.
failure is devastating. But what the truth is, failure is the process.
Hmm. Well, and again, it's how it manifests, right? So, like, a lot of it is to do with triggers, right? So, like, think about the triggers that would set you off. And below those, like, what gets your anxiety going, right? The second somebody describes a project, where it requires a high lot of detail, custom work, are you putting yourself and your imagination on that job site, supervising that work?
Right.
That's a perfectionist, right? And again, think of those triggers as being things that we want to identify, acknowledge, all right, and then work to move away from, because those triggers are what's going to pull you back in and blow your time, right? It's going to blow your energy. It's not helpful at a certain point, right? And below that, really question, well, where is this coming from? Where does it stem from? Why do I feel like the world will fall down if I'm not there?
Right.
Like where does that, and again, I've seen it a lot of times where guys, their crews can do just as good a job as they can, and they don't like
Sometimes
it.
better.
Actually, let me just be honest with you. The reason I was directed to write this is because it was at a time when I was giving up project management. Okay. And again, like everybody, I had really, hung on to this thing, and nobody can run projects like me. Nobody, and below all that, I realized something very early on in the process. I'm not as good as I thought I was.
Yeah, that's
and
funny when that happens.
and it went backwards on me, realizing when I brought into somebody that was an actual fucking pro. It was like, oh man, like I was so far off the mark and so far, like it's not even my personality, it's not in my time zone, it's not, and all it was fear of failure. That's
Yeah.
all it was. It was a scared little kid in the corner, just being, telling myself these messages, giving myself, permission to stand in my own way. Like
Yeah.
again, when I had to give it up, and you realize by giving it up that there were people that did it way better than me, that way better than I could ever imagine doing it. And they still, to this day, I mean, I've told you the story lots of times. I don't necessarily get along with them, but they do something and they've achieved more in project management than I could ever imagine myself doing, nor would I want. Right. So again, that's how the business grew. That's how I grew. And it was one of those moments where you just realize, wow, I've been hanging on to this thing for so long, and it's caused me so much burden and so much like anxiety and stress and everything else. And all it was taking the action of hiring the right person to take it over.
Right. And that's a hard one to let go because,
Totally.
project management is like the last barrier to liability. And you know that. And when you suck at it,
Right.
you feel like you got to be there because it's all on
But
you.
but again, how many of you guys really? And this is kind of in the weeds a bit, but I don't think most people realize just how better some other people can be at it
Right.
naturally. Like again, I have a personality that I can be a great project manager, and there's definitely like I can hold my own, but I'm not built for it. I'm
No.
not built for redundant, like over and over repetitive tasks. I'm not a manager. I'm a leader. I'm a visionary. Like I see opportunities where when you're in that role, like it's about holding the line. Like again, I have a project manager now that I taught to do things 10 years ago, and they're being done the exact same way today. Every single day, you make sure everybody's following it to the line, right? And that works. That is effective. People know what they're getting. Like there's no new, different anything. It's all the same, right? And again, I think that if we're running processes and procedures and stuff like that, like there's a difference between the person who creates them and envisions them and sees how they work and the person that's actually going to run them, right? Big difference. And that was a kind of a moment where I realized, hey, you know what? I don't really love the position. I don't really like the thing, but I'm holding on to it because of control, right? And why am I holding on to control? I'm afraid of failure, and just like you said, I was afraid of finding out that I wasn't that good at it.
Yeah.
And the truth was, I was. I mean, I would in a scale of 1 to 10, I was like a 7 when I
Yeah,
could
I'm
have a
sure you were
10,
better
right?
than most. But would
Right.
you disagree with, the statement that perfection, we confuse it, that perfection is pride in what we do,
For
when
sure, but
really it's a fear.
right. It's again, at a certain point, it gets you from one point to the other, right? And I think we can acknowledge that there is a point, but there's a max output to it, right? It doesn't get you more money, doesn't pay your
No,
bills, that may be argued, but then there's the point of negative returns, right? At again, how many people have you lost? How many, good enough, situations could you have rolled with and you didn't allow it? Like how many, like again, the negative far outweighs the positives, and just in growth, right? Like again, I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to a guy that's in his 50s, 60s that is like the classic perfectionist where his business should have been. And I mean, they're smart. They're like they have the knowledge. I'm like, why haven't you just done this yourself? Well, it's because of this. It's because of that. I couldn't find this person. I'm like, no,
right,
you never allowed yourself permission to fail, right? Like if it fails, so what? Try again. Try over again. Try 100 times. Who cares? At the end, what's worse, staying exactly where you are forever, or feeling the pain or the burden, which ends up being nothing compared to the stress of staying in the same
for
spot,
sure.
right? And just push through it. Like get over it, right? Be uncomfortable. Like that's growth. That is where we grow. And that's again, it's confused, right? If it's not perfect and it didn't feel good and it didn't go comfortably, then it must not be right.
Right. When the reality is that the only bad decision is no decision.
That's right. And no action, right? So
Right.
again, if it's going to take you 13 years to make a decision and to take some action, just add it up. Like, if your goal is to retire or to sell your business in 5 years and you struggle to delegate, right, because of your perfectionism, you struggle to retain employees because of your perfectionism, you struggle to see how anyone in the world could do it as good as you. All right. These are very, very serious things. And that's when you're at the point of negative returns.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've taken this very seriously. Like,
Hmm.
I have a whole list of things that are almost done that
Right.
weren't ready to
Correct.
launch, right?
Correct.
And then they just end up on a pile, and then they end up on the back
Yeah.
burner. Stuff
Right.
that's almost ready to go, almost
And
ready
again,
to deliver.
I think that that's probably a lot of owners out there. I know that it was me for a period of time until I learned to ask people to keep me accountable. Until I found a group that could keep me accountable, and that I realized that again, take imperfect action. Imperfect action. Again, I would say that it's saved me decades. All right, who cares? At the end of the day, the perfectionist also believes that the whole world is watching them when they're not. Right? No one
Yeah,
cares.
that's a
No
good
one
point to
cares.
make. That's a
Right?
good
No
point to
one's
make.
watching you. No one's that involved. Like, again, you think the light's on you, it's not. All right. And I mean, the best example I can give you is when I burned down the church. No one ever said anything to me. It was in the newspapers. It was like no one ever, like, people knew, but like there was, like, what I thought and what happened. Like, it's not a Hollywood movie. People don't care that much about you. You're not in the tabloids. Like, no one said anything. And in fact, it was ran the other way when I really, like, the fear of the failure. Yeah, it was massive, right? There was a lot of mental things that it stopped me from doing for a long time, just in terms of getting over it. But when I talk to other companies and other owners that have been through very similar things, they're like, "Oh, we only burned down one." I'm like, "What?" Like, no, we've got many. Like, it happens all the time. Like, it's just a matter of time before something like that happens. It's the nature of the business that you're in, right? Now, is it
Sure.
good? Is it pleasant? No. But did you survive it? Yes. Right. So again, I don't like perfectionism would have paid off there, but again, that's maybe a bad example. But think about it that way, right?
Yeah, you look around you. I mean, look at any tech product, any software, anything
Right.
that's ever been delivered to you has always sucked before it
Hmm.
got really good.
That's right.
And it went out the door just like
That's
that.
right.
Facebook was nothing important. It
That's right.
sucked, but it was
That's
just good
right.
enough.
Yep. Just good enough. And that's what and again, at the end of the day, being good enough and sucking for a while is way better than just being stuck.
100%, because that's what iterations are for. That's why you can go
That's right.
back and fix it and make
That's
it
right.
better.
You learn, you regroup. And again, with perfectionism, you can take these steps as long as you're measuring, right? And you're looking at you have the right perspective for it, then it's going to improve. It gets better. And the more and more you realize where the source of that comes from, you can beat it all together, right? And I've seen lots of guys that have just totally dropped. Myself, I've gone the opposite way now, where it's like, hey, let's get this done. All right. If it's a matter of someone saying, this needs to be fixed or that needs to be fixed, so what? At least we're still moving ahead. We're
Right.
not just stuck in plan zone where in the no man's land, right?
Well, I think it's a good opportunity for everybody to reflect and think about what you are almost ready to sort of do and do
Hmm.
it.
Take action in big imperfect actions. That's the way. And don't put the pressure on yourself. Like I said, I mean, there's going to be things that go well and things that don't go so well. All right. Give the things that you're trying enough time and space and energy. Again, I see perfectionists start something, and then one thing goes wrong, or they don't get the result that they're looking for specifically, and they write the whole project off. Right, just like that. And I've seen it many, many times. That's not the result, right? You've got to be able to give it proper time and have a measurement where your emotions and your observations aren't going to get in the way of judgment, right?
Love it. Maybe we should leave it there, Jay.
For sure.
Yeah, I think we covered it all. You have
Yeah.
yourself a good day. We'll do this again next week.